The Lord's Supper is one of the names given to this memorial or celebration, or that which we partake of every first Sunday of the month. Now, in different traditions, of course, it is called by different names. Some traditions, they call it the Eucharist. In some traditions, they call it the blessing. In some traditions, of course, we call it the communion. In some traditions, they call it the Lord's Supper. In some traditions, they call it the mystery. And there are many different names by which this is known. So whenever you may hear different traditions, different churches or denominations calling it by different name. But in principle, they are speaking about the same thing. Before I want to focus on one major aspect of this communion that we celebrate here today, as it is called in our tradition. And I want to focus on it as a memorial. As a memorial, because Jesus said, as often as you do it in remembrance of me. Of course, I say that there are many components to the Lord's Supper. There is a component that we call the memorial because Jesus talks about in remembrance of me. But there's also a component of the new covenant because Jesus also said, this is the new covenant in my blood. There's also a component of it being a sacrament, of it being signifying a hope for the future, and there's also a component on it being a sacrifice. And so we are going to talk about these other components at some other time. But let me clear up, because I didn't want to go there, but one of the questions that was asked, and is always asked in terms of partaking of the Lord's Supper, who ought to partake of it, and should children partake of it? And that was the question that was put to me. Should children partake of the Lord's Supper? And of course, I'll answer that another time. I wouldn't tell you that right here now. But I want to deal with the whole idea of some of the things that have been surrounding the Lord's Supper, just before I go to what I really want to speak on, and especially in partaking of it in an unworthy manner. Now, in the context in which we speak, now Paul is the one who really made mention of partaking of the Lord's Supper unworthily. Now, in the context in which we speak, one of the reasons, or the reason that he really focused on, was in the manner and the disposition and the way that these people partook of the Lord's Supper. They partook of it as though they were eating food in their houses. They did not recognize the sacredness and the significance of what they were partaking of. So, as he said, they were not really being in communion, because the word communion simply means sharing together, participating, or sharing in a common meal in the context of communion. It is a word that we use for fellowship, and fellowship is a caring, sharing relationship in community. So, the communion, they were not really in commune, or they were not communing with each other. They were really not in communion, because one whoever came first, like some people looking for the best piece of bread. Some greedy, they're drinking the majority of the wine. And they were treating it as though it was something common and not sacred. They were not following it according to the model of Jesus. And Paul highlighted, he says, you ought to sit. In other words, everybody should be sharing together. It's like, like what we do in our own home sometimes. Who come first, go in the pot and take the biggest piece of meat. One trying to get all the juice. There are some homes where you have, where they commune together. In other words, everybody sit on the table and they share the food. Nobody's coming and take before everybody is seated. You don't eat before everybody is seated. Everyone will be seated and you pray and so on. That is the kind of model. And when Jesus celebrated the supper, of course, they were sitting in one place. They were together. And he broke the bread and he distributed to everybody. In other words, nobody wasn't eating before the other person arrived. Everybody was there and they shared that meal. They were communing. They were in communion. They were participating in sharing this meal. And so Paul was talking about that. That was the attitude of the people. That was the attitude of the people. That is what he says. He was saying, so many of you are sick. Many of you are dying because they were participating in unworthily. They were in an unworthy manner. The King James, the NIV, talking about in an unworthy manner. It was the way they were doing the thing. They were taking a secret thing and sacred thing and make it cheap. It's like when we come to church, by extension. We can meet together, but we're not really having church. Because when there's a group talking in the back there, when there's everybody doing their own thing, we are not communing. We are not together. We are not participating in the service of what's happening in the worship of God. Because somebody like me in the back, so somebody having their own conversation here. This one, no. Paul said, "What? You ain't coming to church, man. You ain't coming to worship nobody. You ain't coming to worship God. You come for a social event. You come to talk as you will when you meet people on the road. You just come to lime. You have not come to worship. That's by extension, really. No, that's not what he said, but in principle, that is what we do how we treat the sacred thing. How we treat the sacred thing. And so that's what they were doing. So Paul said, as a consequence of this, some of you are sick because you are not discerning the Lord's body. You are not discerning the significance, the sacredness of this thing. You're treating it like any ordinary thing. You're not treating it with that sanctity and understanding the significance. You just come in like if you're in your house and their houses, they have no rules, they have no values. They have houses where this one take food, you go and sit in the corner, he said, that's how you're behaving. And because of that, he said, many of you are sickly, many of you die. That's really the context here, really. It was not. Now, what has happened over the years is that we have taken this and we have expanded it to many things. Now, in some traditions, if a woman is seeing her monthly, and probably that's one of the reasons we have a lot of people are staying in some communion, because it is bordering on that time when some people are seeing their menstrual cycle. In some traditions, if you are seeing your menstrual cycle, you can't partake of it. There are some traditions, if a woman and a man were intimate last night, you can't partake of it. And there are a lot of things that has been attached to that Jesus never said. Nowhere you read in this book that Jesus never really zeroed in terms of, because there were people there whose heart was dark as sin. Judas was a sinner. He was just waiting for the opportunity. He was already had in mind to betray Christ. And one of you is a devil. You are sitting right here, and he says, I'm going to give you first. Now, the thing about some of us is because if we have a little quarrel with our husband this morning, we say, I ain't coming to take communion. Is that to eat in an unworthy manner? Of course I say. Of course I say. Let me move on a little bit here. Some of us, if something happened that we didn't like, it might be no sin. But you say, why today's communion Sunday, boy? Now, if people did... Let me say this by extension, right? That, of course, if you and your neighbor is not in good terms, you should not partake of the communion. If you have hatred in your heart, because you are not communing. Because communion is people coming together and participating together, sharing together, and you cannot really be a person who have your enmity with your brother on the left or on the right. You ain't talking to them, you hate them, and you're coming to take the Lord's Supper. For this reason Christ came and died. Christ said, forgive, and so on. So if you are willfully disobedient to the principles and teaching of Christ, you should not partake of the communion yet. Jesus put it this way, he said, if you have aught against your brother or vice versa, and you come to bring the gift to the altar, and you remember, he said, go back first. Go to the brother and say, brother, I don't know why you're vexed with me, but I'm sorry if I did anything to you or vice versa. And he said, then come back. And that's a good principle. So if you do wrong and you ask God forgiveness of sins, by all means, friend. If you have a little misunderstanding with your husband, you're coming to church and you're able to say, husband, well, forgive me because you're coming to church. I mean, or vice versa. Come and partake of it. And therefore, if it is very... If there are a lot of people who just don't partake of the Lord's Supper, and I said if it's for those reasons, you're seeing your period as a woman, or you had an intimate moment, those are not reasons why you should not. This is not stipulated as far as Jesus is concerned. Is that Old Testament or the Old Testament cruel? Some of them look crude, because if you have any deformity, you were not supposed to come into the presence of God. And you're born so, you're born with some disabled or differently able situation, you can't come. You can't be a priest if your hand crooked. If you had to be upright, you can't be a hunchback, you can't be a priest, you can't come and serve God. That was the Old Testament, and sometimes what we do, we kind of bring over some of these concepts into Christianity in this day of grace and truth. And we corrupt the thing like that. And we come with our own ideas too. So I just wanted to say that, Jesus said, Paul, of course, brought to light the fact that you could partake of this thing in an unworthy manner. And if you are, of course, living a kind of life that is not in harmony with Christ, you should not partake until you have made that right. Because this is why he came. Right? So that's just a little bit on the top. It's not all, it's a little bit on the top. I just need to say that. So, because, that's one of the problems today in terms of, I found among many people. And if you come from a certain tradition, and that is what that you were taught, of course, you will come over with that. you'll come over with that kind of idea as far as the communion is concerned. But what really is the communion? The meaning of this? And I want to talk about one. I tell you, I want to focus on the memorial. But I want to also just pass over one component, another component in terms of it is a sacrament. This, what we celebrate here this morning, is a sacrament. And a sacrament, by definition, and I have added my understanding to it from all of the stuff that has been defined, is that a sacrament, this is my definition, an outward visible sign of inward grace and a pledge of assurance that God will do what he said he will do. Instituted by God and entrusted to the church, by which those who receive it with proper disposition are blessed. Now, in some traditions, there are 7 sacraments. Marriage is a sacrament in some traditions. And we, of course, in the Protestant world, we talk about 2 basic sacraments. It has to do with the Lord's Supper and also baptism. But there are other traditions, and I usually say, whatever regarded to the Lord is all right to me. But some people feel washing is a sacrament. And a sacrament is simply, let me say it, let me use a simpler term. It is something that was ordained by Jesus. That's a simple definition. Something that Jesus said that you must do as a church, and you must participate in it as a person. But it points to something. Like baptism is said to be, baptism don't change nobody. You could go down a dry sinner and come up a wet sinner. Because it points to something. It is not, it doesn't have power in itself. Now, I will talk about it the next time, because a lot of people teaching in the communion do a lot of stuff to them, but I will talk about it the next time. I best just mention that a little bit. But the thing is, we define baptism as an inward sign of outward grace. So in other words, you are a sign tells you something. A sign says, Buku, 5 miles from here. Don't go anywhere. Stop. Danger ahead. That was a sign. A sign tells you something. It points to something. So if I do so, I'll give you a sign. I mean to come. Now, so it is saying something. So I want to repeat my definition. It might be a little long for you, but I want to give you the basic thing is, it is a sacrament, something that God has instituted. Now, Jesus never said to celebrate Christmas, right? He hasn't, he never told us that. Right? Jesus never told us to do a lot of stuff that we do. Right? Now, as I said that, I'm speaking here as I'm impressed I'll stick to the line, but I just want to say that the other part that gives people problems is that often, as you do it in remembrance of me. Now, how often is often? And some people make a big issue of that. And I realize in the last 5 years or so, there's been a revival in this sacramentarianism in terms of what we need to do and how often you should have it, communion every day, every week, as the case may be. But the one thing I like about Jesus, Jesus never prescribed the amount of time. One thing I've learned, and I say it and I say it to you, one thing I've learned over the years, and I learned that from Reverend Dufresne, he says when you read the Bible, there are something that are descriptive and some that are prescriptive. And sometimes we misunderstand the prescription from the description. And there are people who are doing other stuff that has been described, not prescribed. Nothing is wrong if you do it, but don't try to put it down my throat and say you're supposed to do that. That's where the problem comes in. If you want to do it, that's fine. So I'm saying that to you, right? So you have to be careful what has been prescribed or has been described. What is prescribed, a prescription, the doctor gives you a prescription, you have to 3 times a day. Jesus' prescription was as often as you do it. So whether you do it 5 times, that's fine. If you do it 3 times, that's fine. If you do it 5 times a week, that's fine. He never stipulated the amount of time except he gives you an open statement by saying as often as you do it. So there are people who celebrate it once a year. There are people who celebrate like our tradition once every month. There are people who celebrate every week. I said that. Nothing is wrong with that, and I'm saying that to you now because when you hear people talking, you will be able to speak to them from not a fanatic sense, and they don't understand what they're really saying, but understand what the Bible really teaches. Now, so let me see. It's a sacrament, right? And I want to say that it's an outward sign. Visible sign, effective sign, and that efficacious sign of inward grace. Something has happened. And it's also a pledge that God gives to us. And it was given to the church, entrusted to the church, for the church to continue with this until time turn into eternity. So, therefore, it's in a sacrament and it's ordained by God. I want to say to us, you as a Christian, you must partake of the Lord's Supper. You should be partaking of it. And you should do it as often as whatever association or fellowship you're in as they are doing it. But I want to focus on what Jesus said. And this is the component. It is said, he said, do this in remembrance of me. So it is a memorial. That is one component. It is not all. So when I talk about a memorial, that is not all that the communion signifies. But I just was focusing on this one part. The other part I want to focus on is the part of covenant. He said, this is the new covenant in my blood. Very significant statement and important for us to understand. But I want to talk about a memorial. He says, as often as you do it in remembrance of me. And Paul said, when you do it, you proclaim the Lord's death until he returns. So a memorial, because I have to work with the definition, a memorial, what is a memorial? Well, let me first say, what does it mean to remember? To remember something is said to be a mental reflection you're able to recall. I don't want to go through all the processes of memory. Some of you have been taught that, some of you teach that. But part of it is to recall the information or to recall the experience. So Jesus said, I want you to, in one sense, to mentally reflect. Call to memory. This significant, this sign, this is what we do here today. But remember in the Bible, to remember is not only a mental reflection, it is really, as one definition said, the Hebrew word for it, I can't pronounce that word. I don't know how you pronounce that word, but Hebrew have a kind of way, how they pronounce it, like if you're hawking some coal. But I want to say it has to do with bringing the past to the present. So you are taking what has happened in the past and you're bringing it into this present reality. So when we come and we put these elements on the table, we are bringing that past into the present. We are reminding men of something that happened in the past, or what Jesus did in the past. But a memorial, in terms of what we have before us, the bread and the wine, is something designed to preserve the memory of a person. That's one definition. A memorial is something that is designed to preserve the memory of a person. And in our culture and in the culture of the world, there are many ways you remember people. They will call certain, they will have parks. You have James Park. And you'll also have maybe a statue or a sculpture. And in James Park, I went there once and I saw the head of a slave who was said to, I forget his name, who was said to lead a rebellion for freedom of slaves in Tobago. So that the person will not be forgotten.